Hello and welcome to the University of Kentucky's HR Support of Supervisors Series. Today we will be talking about communicating from a distance and staying connected with your teams. The purpose of this series is really to offer support to our supervisors as they are supporting their teams. So some of the topics that we cover in this series will be very specific towards helping the supervisor stay connected with their team or offer support to their teams. And other topics will be geared more so towards the supervisor and making sure that they are taking care of themselves. So this week's theme is establish calm and stay connected. So establish calm and stay connected. That's our theme for this week. And when you look at this quote, it kind of dives into that a little bit more. You will never speak to anyone more than you speak to yourself in your head. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. We encourage you to do that. In times of change and uncertainty and when things are moving, sometimes at high speeds and things have to get done, sometimes in short notices, it's easy to sometimes not be kind to ourselves. So we encourage you to think about what you're even repeating to yourself in your head about yourself and the work that you are doing, and remind yourself that you are doing the best you can at this time with what you have. So when you think about staying connected to your teams and your employees, there's a few challenges that you want to think about. And these are challenges that might make it maybe a little bit difficult, and just barriers to be prepared to overcome. So first of all, you have that physical distancing and the social distancing. And I actually borrowed that part from our therapists in the Office of Work Life, because they are leaning more towards talking about physical distancing, because their point is you can still stay socially connected to people at this time, but it may require a little more effort. But you definitely are physically distanced. And sometimes, depending on the person and their personality and their usual routines and even their job, they may be very used to interacting with a lot of people all the time. And to make that transition to where you have to stay away from people and now you're distanced physically, that can be a little bit of a challenge. So as a supervisor, that's something you want to think about as you're connecting with your employees and you're asking them, how are you doing? You may want to think about that person's role and what they normally do and how they normally are in the office even, and maybe ask some key questions to continue to connect with them. Also, think about the limited access that you have to campus resources. So for example, if this person normally is able to walk around and connect with people across the hall or in the buildings next door, or take walks with colleagues on campus on breaks, I mean now, or even certain resources that maybe there are certain places they used to eat or frequent on campus, sometimes there's just now you're not maybe able to have access to those resources. So that can be a challenge as a person, as you're thinking about, I want to connect with them and what's happening with them and potentially what might be impacting them. Just think about that. And then of course, the lack of structure or routine. We're not in the 8 to 5 go to work, or 8 to 7:30, or whatever your timeline may have been for your schedule. We're not in that usual routine. I mean, even if you had certain meetings, certain days of the week, certain times, you see certain people in certain places, all those things, sometimes we don't think of those as routines necessarily, but they are part of your routine. So if you always walk up and down the hall and see the same people and chat with them for 5 minutes or so, that was an informal part of your routine that you may now be missing. And then just your workspace. We all probably have, depending on where you work, you have some sort of a workspace. And depending on your workspace, you may be missing that. You may really be like, oh my gosh, just have it set up just perfect. And now you're missing just going to that space. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So when you talk about feeling forgotten, a challenge that you want to really check in with your employees to make sure that they don't feel forgotten, they don't feel out of the loop, they don't feel left out. And that can happen a little more easily when people are spread out in different places, especially if this is very new. If the person has worked remotely previously, they may already have adapted to that, and they may already have strategies to make sure they stay connected to the team members. But if they have not, this may be very new to them. and they may find themselves feeling like out of the loop a little bit. So as a supervisor, you have an opportunity to make sure that everyone feels like they're part. Technology and equipment concerns, that could happen. So just making sure everyone knows how to use all the necessary equipment that they need to do their job. Make sure they know how to access tech support if they need that. So just thinking about that. The work duties may have changed some because of where they are now, or they may not have access to some of the like copiers, things like that you don't think about, and the scanning and faxing and so forth. So adjustments, what adjustments are they having to make? Unfamiliar tasks, are you asking them to do things that they're not familiar with? It's a different, it may even be something that they can very well do and do very successfully, but it's new to them. And then just the whole staying in touch with colleagues. This as a supervisor, you might suggest a few things. You might suggest a meetup once or twice a week, just a 15 minutes. How are you? Just something to connect. And then, of course, they cannot access I was talking about that unusual informal connections. Again, back to the passing people in the hallway or walking and seeing certain people, or even just the campus climate. You may have walked up certain streets and walked in certain areas and you see the flower beds and just things like that. There's a lot of things that you could potentially miss. And then possibly the person might just be concerned about doing their job. They may be concerned about, do they have enough to do? They may be concerned about, do you trust them to do their job? There are some things about doing a good job that may be concerning them. And then barriers to self-care or self-care routine. So think about if the person has, let's say this person walks a lot during lunch, or they walk from their vehicle to their building and that's a 10-minute walk. Like that's a routine where they at least get a little exercise and stretching in. And if they now are at home every day, they may be trying to figure out ways to be a little more intentional at home. And they may be loving that actually. But that's something to ask about, just to make sure that they are taking care of themselves, and just kind of ask, like, what are you doing? How's that going? There may be some family concerns. We know that there are a lot of parents, like working parents, that have children at home, that have school-age children, and they now are helping them with schoolwork during the workday. And so that may be a time for you as the supervisor to ask them, do they need to flex their schedule, for example? Maybe they're not able to work 8 hours straight or 7.5 hours straight because they do have to stop and assist with homework. But just having that conversation and maybe you bringing it up and say, will it be helpful to have a break from 11 to 1 and then pick up from 1? Just make some suggestions to help ease that stress of, oh my goodness, I have the schoolwork with this child. Or maybe they have family members that's ill right now or dealing with illness, and they are just trying to deal with that. Or other family concerns. Maybe they're family members outside of the state, or outside of, maybe even a family member in a nursing home down the street that they can't even go visit, and that's a concern for them. So just be thinking about the possible challenges. And then the mental load. I don't know if you guys have heard of this term, but mental load is basically when you have a lot of things running through your head. It's almost like that never-ending to-do list. And you're keeping up with who has an appointment and who needs shoes, and we're about to run out of sugar, and you're just thinking all kinds of things. So you add the mental load of work. You may be thinking about the projects that's coming up, and who do you need to talk to about certain things, and who can help you with certain things. And so it just goes on and on. So those are, this is a possible challenge for people. And then health concerns for themselves, the emotional, mental, physical. These are just things to be mindful of that can potentially be a challenge. And then also a challenge if you are trying to stay connected, or they are themselves trying to stay connected. There is that potential for isolation, especially if that person, maybe they live alone. Maybe they have children that are grown and out of the house, or they don't have children at all. Maybe they don't have a partner at home. It's just them. So that's something to think about when you talk about potentials for a person feeling lonely. Not just I'm working in a different workspace, but I'm now feeling alone a little bit. And so with this slide, there's additional information that just talks about loneliness and how it's different, and what it means to different people. And if you look, it talks about that it's important to understand exactly how people experience loneliness in their job. And so here's a few questions to consider with that. How does it affect their work? So if a person's feeling lonely, how does that affect their work? Does that make them feel sluggish? Does that make them feel sleepy? Like, are they having trouble sleeping? Whatever. How does it shape their relationships with their colleagues? Are they starting to withdraw? Are they starting to be more needy? Wanting to talk to people all the time? I mean, just whatever it may be, it may express itself in different ways. So it's just something to think about. And what can be done to help a lonely employee? So we do have our therapists in the Office of Work Life that would be more than happy to talk to supervisors if you do have someone that you want to just talk about maybe some strategies for you to assist them or conversations to have with them. And of course, the employees of themselves are welcome to make an appointment with one of our therapists as well. And it talks about provide timely and effective support for lonely employees that can help break the cycle. So back to sometimes just checking in and asking how they're doing and having informal conversations, not just talking about work, can make all the difference. So communicating from a distance. I mean, so first of all, we know we don't want employees to ever be trying to read our minds because that can be a little disheartening. And ask them how you can help them, and you tell them, here's how I can help. Here's what I can do. I want to assist you. But making sure that they are not ever trying to read your mind about what you expect of them, making sure expectations are very clear about their schedules, their workday, their assignments, their deadlines, the task, all of those things. Making sure that that is very, very clear can be wonderful in clearly communicating across distance. And then also over communicate. Sometimes this is the time where you might need to over communicate a little bit. And again, sometimes you do have to think about the employee and where they are. Are they a new employee? Are they a seasoned employee? Are their tasks new? Are they things they've been doing for a long time? Will they need additional assistance from you or feedback from you? Or are they just completely fine and they don't need that much feedback? And so also being creative in how you do your outreach. So back to, you can do something fun for outreach. You can send a text of your pet if you have a pet or a stuffed pet and say, what does this look like? You can do something kind of fun like that. It doesn't always have to be, I'm reaching out because it's related to work. And so that helps the person to stay connected. A lot of those informal connections oftentimes can build in a very positive way and makes the person feel heard and feel cared for. So frequent updates, when things update, when things are changing with your work and their work and even university, just making sure that they stay up to date on things. And so I've been talking about supervising a little bit based on the individual needs and functions. That's pretty much what I was alluding to earlier. When you are thinking about the individual and what they need and their job function, you're going to maybe communicate a little differently, or you're going to adjust the way you communicate, and making sure you stay connected with them might look a little different. So asking good questions and listen. That listen sometimes requires a pause. So you ask questions and then you just listen and see what they say. So sometimes just something, that simple can be wonderful. And I've talked about being casual as often as possible. So I was thinking about how if you can create those I see you moments, that's where you maybe know a little bit about the person and you communicate based on that. So let's just say, this person loves birds or robins, or they love Starbucks or whatever. And you might send them a little cute Starbucks picture with a quote that says, hang in there, you can do this, or something. So just thinking about how you can do I see you moments, which could be moments where you're basically thinking about what you know about that person. I have a colleague that loves those Funyun chips, and every now and then I would just grab a bag and give it to her. And she's like, oh my goodness. So, just those, from a distance, what can you do that's like, I understand you, I see you, I know a little bit about you and your interests, and I'm just going to communicate with you based on that. Sometimes that can go a long ways. So again, with the communicating, scheduling meetings, using instant messaging, sharing Outlook calendars to make sure you can connect that way, knowing what their person's doing, they know what you're doing. That can be a great way to communicate. Informal chats are wonderful. And then if you are communicating and you're using some sort of video means like a Zoom or even Skype video, make sure you observe the body language. Make sure you listen for tones, because sometimes the person may not want to say certain things, or they may just not be in a place to talk about it, or it may just be personal and private. But if you observe their body language and the tones, sometimes that helps you to know, okay, they're feeling a little stressed, or they're feeling a little anxious, or maybe I should tell them, don't worry about that particular project. Let's hold off on that for a while. And you might notice their body language change immediately because they're so stressed about this particular additional project or what have you. So just listening for what is not said can be really, really beneficial and helpful. And keeping in mind what you can control when you talk about communicating effectively from a distance. I mean, there's going to be things that you can control and things you can't control, like things that's personal to that person's life. You can't do anything about that, maybe necessarily. So just thinking about what you can control and making sure you're operating from that mode, and creating a routine. So when that comes to communication, it could be that every Monday you have a check-in meeting, every Friday you have a check-in meeting, every 2 weeks you have a meeting, whatever, some sort of a routine where the person can expect that and even plan for it and anticipate it and look forward to it. And then of course the growth mindset is always helpful when we talk about anything. This is just that mindset that says, I can do this. I may not know now how I'm going to get through this, but I will. That growth mindset. And then find the fun. Figure out how to do some fun things with your team. Figure out how to connect and communicate in a way that's really makes them feel like, wow, this is not just work, and we all need to laugh from time to time, and here we go. Remembering the little things, that's again connecting with them and thinking about things you know about them. If you know their child had this recital coming up, for example, in April, and you just be like, how's the child doing about not being able to do that recital? Or how are you feeling about that? That could be one of those little connections where you remembered something was coming up, or maybe that person has a birthday and they were planning to take a trip and now they can't. And you may be asking, well, what are you going to do? And, just that little thing. But the big picture here is that you are always in a position where you're offering support and encouragement. And at the same time, being careful not to overstep, but just letting them know that you are there to support them. So this slide really just reminds you that we still in HR have remote participation for all of our services and resources, that we are more than willing to talk to groups and offer consultations and counseling appointments and workshops and webinars and so forth. But you can find all of this information on our website if you want to connect on any of these resources. And then of course, if you go to the HR website, you can always find contact information, whether it be a website or email or upcoming events. We have upcoming events listed on our calendar, so you are always welcome to go and check those out. So as we wrap up, just want to remind you that we do believe in you. I hope you believe in yourself. I know you believe in your teams. And remember to be kind to yourself.